So let me start. My name is Dave Jackson. I'm the CEO of Clicktools. Clicktools was founded over 10 years ago now, and we've been providing feedback solutions since day one. We were one of the first 20 apps to be integrated with Salesforce. We were one of the first on the App Exchange, and I think perhaps our proudest boast is that we've won the Customer Choice Award, which is voted for by customers, each of the 5 years that it's run so far, and we have high hopes to continue that trend. You can perhaps tell by my accent that we're based here in the UK, but we also have an office in Phoenix, and we count over 800 customers, including brands like American Express, Salesforce, Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, Maserati, Pitney Bowes, Aon, and on and on and on. And whilst we started life in the survey business, and we are still very active in the survey business, we learned quite early on that customers were using our application to do a number of other things. And we coined the phrase, beyond surveys. And that phrase is very appropriate for what we're going to listen to and learn about today. We're going to hear from Greg Malpass, who's the CEO and founder of Traction On Demand. And they've been a partner of ours for some time and worked on a number of projects with involving Salesforce and Clicktools. And I'll leave Greg to say a little bit more about Traction. We have no hesitation in recommending Traction if you're looking for a Salesforce partner. They're based in Canada and work extensively across the US. And I think the use case that you're going to hear about just demonstrates and provides examples of their innovative approach, their cost-effective approach that they bring to all of their work. So with that glowing reference, let me hand the presentation over to Greg, who will take you through the presentation and say we'll do questions afterwards. Greg, all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, David, and thank you everyone for choosing to attend today's webinar. David, if you fire over control to me, I will get my screen all ready. And this is actually a presentation that I'm really excited to be sharing with everyone here today. And a big reason for that is it's not often that as the Salesforce.com implementation partner, we have a chance to really share how we run our business. And so, let's fire this up. So as David mentioned, my name is Greg Malpass. I'm the founder and CEO of Traction On Demand. And just to give everyone a very quick history on Traction On Demand, we're a platinum Salesforce.com partner. We've grown quite quickly in the last several years to become the largest Salesforce.com partner north of the border. And that border is the United States-Canada border. We're actually located in Vancouver, BC. We've had the privilege of seeing a little over 1,000 projects successfully delivered, and our preference is always towards tools over code. So while you can certainly do a lot with Visualforce and Apex and the menagerie of tools that Salesforce.com and other systems provide, there's a tremendous wealth of tools in the ecosystem that can help you get your projects delivered more effectively. And what's also interesting in today's use case is we're going to talk about how we're utilizing tools not necessarily for what maybe they're originally engineered to do, to deliver a tremendous value to our business as we scale. So we've been around the Salesforce ecosystem for 8 years. So it's 8 years ago that I founded Traction. And in the last 3 years, we've had the privilege of experiencing 2.74 times year-over-year growth. So, and actually the funny thing about this webinar is when we originally were talking to Clicktools, we had planned for 30 people in 12 months to be added to Traction. And as a result of the systems and tools that we applied, we grew a lot faster. And that actually ended up being 45 people. Now, in the grand scheme of a large enterprise, 45 people doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's more than triple what your original headcount was, it's a lot. From a process perspective, because of the whole Salesforce ecosystem, really our company is a process delivery shop. We bend technology around general business needs. Our history with Clicktools, I'm proud to say that we've been partners for 7 years, and our start was humble with Clicktools. It was and grew from there. The system and the platform really opened our eyes to the possibility. The first deployment of Clicktools was simply a campaign status update, and that grew into scripting and partner lead and opportunity management and event management implementations. And one thing that excites me about Clicktools is it's an application that's continuously evolving. So able to continue to build and extend on a very strong platform. So from a user adoption perspective, the team is continually finding net new innovations on a fairly regular basis. We also feel Clicktools, and I was a voter for the Customer Choice Awards. We feel Clicktools is one of the most versatile apps on the App Exchange, and that's what I'm going to go through today. In terms of business case for traction, and to kind of set the stage for today's kind of presentation, traction onboarding was before we started looking at the tools that we could essentially apply to a better system. It was ad hoc, and we were driving recruitment through spreadsheets. Emails were gathering a ton of information. It's a highly disorganized process, and a tremendous amount of intelligence was being lost. Now, from a marketing and lead generation perspective, we had tools. We were utilizing Marketo. We were, of course, utilizing Salesforce.com, and having had fairly good visibility in terms of how the business was coming in. But what we're realizing is, supply and demand. So on the supply side of our world, which is having great candidates in place to be able to execute on the performance of the work, we were really struggling. We had no means of approving recs within our systems, no means of identifying the source of where we're finding best candidates outside of anecdotal or simple conversations. We had no tracking on referrals, although we were attempting to try to get into a pay-for-referral basis for an internal candidate referrals. And quite frankly, great candidates were falling through the cracks. We were providing a very poor first impression for potential employees in joining our company, and we weren't eating our own dog food. And I am not embellishing. These were all very, very significant factors that were leading to great pain in scaling and growing the organization. So the business challenge that we put before our team, and this was being a consulting partner, we're very busy working on everyone else's systems, so we needed to really kind of tighten down in a very focused amount of time and figure out what we were going to do to resolve our candidate recruitment process. And it certainly wouldn't work for us to close doors and work a ton on our system, so we needed something fast and immediate, which is why we turned to tools. We needed to track inbound candidates. We needed to manage recruitment pipeline effectively, have a method of requesting jobs and going through an approval process and releasing jobs to the market, track engagement of the candidates throughout the actual candidate recruitment cycle, and maintain activity with candidates when people may have not been able to keep up. So the idea was, in a situation where we started engaging with candidates and let's say we did not respond or log activity against them within X number of days, the system could pick up and ensure engagement was maintained for a short period of time and log the activity to the stakeholder that's responsible for follow-up on that candidate so then they can pick it up again. We also wanted to lessen the administrative burden around contracting. And it's actually another major point was we were seeing that our employment contracts were evolving a little bit, and which is not the type of document that you want to be evolving. So specific terms, holiday, just very, very simple tactical details were being overlooked in some situations and caught in the last minute. Unfortunately, we didn't hire people with extra vacation and additional salaries, but we had to double check everything. As we were looking out also in our fiscal year 13 objectives, the company's plan was to grow by another almost 3 times, improve our overall processes, maintain our quality, and reduce the cost of administration for our overall business. So we wanted to do this all off less administrative resource. And this is what led us to figuring out the overall Clicktools recruitment process. So our recruitment consideration for today's case study is how to attract candidates, filter them, maintain momentum through the cycle, apply analytics, generate the contracts, rate and rank candidates, cherry pick the best people, and learn from our history. And I'm going to show you the tools that we've assembled in order to do that. Before I get too deep into the actual tools and the process, there's of course an underlying data model behind the system. And quite quickly, what we did, and this isn't an overly complex system, but what we did is we had the system starts by the generation of a job. And we actually subscribed to the WHO methodology. which is a book I could not recommend enough for those of you looking for standardizing on some recruitment processes and really getting outcome-based results on your recruitment and the people that you bring onto your company in terms of setting expectations. We generate the job, and we won't approve a job until the outcomes for the job are all listed. And then there's, of course, a standard approval process. And so what this does is it encourages my management team, when they even have an idea of a role or a function that might be valuable to us, they can generate a job request, and then, of course, there's an approval cycle there. Once a job is approved, a posting is generated, and we'll go through kind of the process there. And then once that posting is generated, when people apply, they insert a candidate record, a corresponding contact, and an application. And the redundancy that between the candidate and the contact is something I'll explain along the way. And if there are any questions specifically around that, which I probably expect there will be sure to list them out, because I'll give you lots of explanation there. So as we go through our cycle, what was interesting is the tools that we actually chose to engage. And these are all tools that Traction had already subscribed to. So we are a Salesforce.com implementation shop, so of course I have Salesforce.com running my business. We're a heavy-duty ClickTools user, and we used it primarily in the beginning for CSAT surveys. We also are a Marketo shop, so we had an internal instance of Marketo for driving our demand marketing generation, lead follow-up, and overall campaign efforts. We utilize FlipTop Media, which is a social append application that does a nightly batch and fills in the Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn information on individuals as they're inserted into the database, and actually even puts in a good-looking picture of them. And it doesn't rely on a single user's authentication. It's actually crowdsourced social information. We also utilize AppExtremes, which the gentleman over at AppExtremes, or the Conga guys as they favorably call themselves, for all of the document generation and our contract creation. And then the actual signature is done through DocuSign. And DocuSign was the system that we already used for all of our contracts. So these were all tools that Traction was paying subscription services to and wanted to get a better way of utilizing or driving this overall recruitment process. And so where things start is simply we generate job requirements, the jobs in Salesforce.com. And here you can see we have a simple what division is it, the job name, who the hiring manager is, in a general status, as well as detailed description, the mission for the hire, and the skills and the outcomes of the job. This is a simple Salesforce.com record. And once the job record is approved, the application posting records can be added. And what the application posting records allow us to do is determine where we're going to place the postings. And this is where the first touch point to ClickTools occurs, because the application posting is going to pass through the job ID, as well as the application posting ID as fixed variables into a ClickTools form and allow someone to fill out the candidate information. So here what you can see is we posted on an internal referral, LinkedIn, Facebook, BC Technology, and the Sauder School of Business, and a number of different properties. And as we go through some of the outcomes, what was interesting is as we found that our system became more and more effective from a volume perspective and engagement perspective, we started to get a little more aggressive in terms of the types of mediums and even the types of advertisements that we placed to attract people into the Traction family. Once we'd advertised or got our initial advertisements and put them out into the various social methods, we started with just simply doing unpaid links, and we've evolved since to start doing some paid advertising around our overall links. The reason I raise that is because we're actually tracking specific candidate campaign or the application posting, it's giving us a sense of ROI, where we're getting our greatest candidates from. Once somebody basically goes through and we generate the overall links for the job offer, the links reference and come into our ClickTools form. And the ClickTools forms are quite simple. We wanted to make sure that we drive easy, simple forms and adoption, and we thought we would take the best practices that our friends at Marketo taught us around marketing nurture and marketing kind of data collection campaigns, where we would go in mass with very simple application, first name, last name. Give us your email or your phone number, whatever way you prefer to be contacted, and copy and paste your resume or upload it directly into the form. Those are the first questions. That's all someone has to do to apply for a job at Traction. And what happens when someone applies for that job is the system then goes through and it inserts it into our Salesforce instance. And this is actually one area where I should spend a few moments to explain the process. And this is because not only are we inserting a candidate that is connected to the job in the application posting, but we're also inserting a contact record in Salesforce. Now, within our contact records, what we did is we actually made it so this gentleman, Hans Vito, as you can see, is linked to an account, and it's showing here in the foot top profile, Traction Candidates. So it's actually inserting a contact that links into an account record, which is a generic holding for all candidates, which allows us to then access the contact through Marketo. Additionally, off the contact, we look back into the candidate so we can reference and pull information that's been dynamically populated. So what you can see is since actually Hans's LinkedIn has evolved to, and this is a real-time feed, so when this originally happened and he was a candidate, he was actually independently running his own business. And so you can see it's actually continuing to evolve. Now, once the contact has been inserted, this is where we go into the Marketo side of the house. And based on the job that's associated to the candidate, we have a series of different dynamic Marketo programs. And the Marketo programs are designed to engage people and ask them additional questions throughout a bit of a journey of learning more about Traction. So we have 5 different Marketo nurture tracks within our Marketo program that all drive to different Clicktools forums. And what you can see here is what we wanted to do is step people through not just a simple application process and try to skim the cream and drive people who are more engaged in the process, but we also wanted to learn a little bit more about them and provide facility for us to measure their overall interaction with us throughout the cycle. And there's a quote in a technology magazine that published some information around this process on us, and it got me into a little bit of trouble with our developers. What it basically said in the quote was, we like to hire lazy developers and hardworking salespeople. And this system gives us a visibility and understanding that. Because in our recruitment cycle, what we do is we do a standard interview, then we do a demonstration where we actually ask any candidate in any role to come in and present to us as if they were Traction. And then the last step is a culture interview. And that middle demo, there's a series of tasks that we ask people to undertake. Now, if it's a developer, the hope is they don't have to put a lot of effort into it, and they do a very, very good job in the demonstration. If it's a salesperson, typically we like to see the hardworking individuals as an attribute that has resulted in success so far here at Traction. So throughout the cycle, these emails actually are sending people links to different documents that are of meaning to us. It's asking them to register and create a developer account on the Salesforce platform. It's also driving them, let's say if they're looking at a marketing role, to take a look at the Marketo platform or take a look at specific white papers. And because we're referring all those links, we're actually tracking in Marketo the overall scores. And so in Marketo, not only are we tracking all the interesting moments, we're also driving a custom score. Marketo, about 1.5 years ago, created the ability to have your own custom scores outside of the simple priority and lead score. So we created a custom score called a candidate score. And we drove specific candidate pluses and minuses based on activity and frequency by role. So here we can see all the different following elements of which progression emails that have been sent to the candidate, which are also time-based, and also looking at the different referring pages that came in. Some of these things, actually, I shouldn't say each, are driving potential scoring improvements. Additionally, over the overall cycle, as we're engaging the candidates, we're not only tracking who their initial referred by person is within the system, but we're also keeping track, of course, all the notes, pre-screening notes, and Clicktools forms are actually completing questions that we're actually running within the interviews environment with the employees or the potential candidates. So a good example is we'll be asking questions about multitasking and what people love to do in their free time. Our recruiters are actually going through and filling in also forms. Now, some of these questions are being populated by the candidate themselves throughout the Marketo cycle. Others are being done directly in the interview via iPad, all using Clicktools forms. When we come to that magical moment where we're looking at bringing the candidate in and generating an employment offer, once we flip the record type to offer, a button appears in our Salesforce instance. At this stage, and this is actually a very important kind of linked to the whole history of how our candidate cycle goes, all the information that has been supplied to us for the person's name, their email address, their home address, has not been henpecked by anybody on the traction side. It's actually been generated based on the source individual. So if I, Greg Malpass, or this is Hans Vito, applied for a job, my name is going to show up exactly as I filled out that originating form. And this is just, it speaks to one of the ancillary benefits of using tools like this, and that the data quality is as good as it could possibly be, and that it's coming from the source. So the information that's been provided throughout the whole candidate cycle, information around the job, information on the salary and the offer for that job, are all populated into an AppStreams or a Congo document, which is then behind the scenes transferred directly into a DocuSign and an offer letter. Once the DocuSign is sent to the candidate, the first signer is, of course, myself as the first person to kind of validate and make sure everything's consistent. And then that goes out to the candidate, and they either, well, hopefully they sign, or they don't, and there's an expiry. If the DocuSign does expire, one of the things that we're actually, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that we're working on as we go forward, we're actually starting to get into a re-engagement cycle. So essentially a nurture cycle, utilizing Marketo. The other interesting piece of this is because the systems are tracking, we have the first touch of the individual, the first create date, and the hire date, or time stamping, all those SLAs, we have a very clear understanding what the average ramp is for a hire. So from a data perspective, utilizing these tools, we're able to actually figure out when we should start hiring based on forward demand. As a quick summary, the tools that we're applying for each of the phases throughout this recruitment cycle include, of course, Salesforce at the planning stage. The advertising, we're utilizing typically Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. From the engagement perspective, we're leveraging Fliptop, Clicktools, and Sites.com, which is where all of the actual offers or the job application postings sit. Marketo is a means of filtering, AppStreams and DocuSign as our closing tools, and learning right back into Salesforce.com. So with that is really the core of the presentation. I'd love to open that up and see if there's any conversations, David, that you'd like to bring forward.
Greg, thanks for that. Great presentation and a really neat application of many different tools. Just a couple of questions from me. And if anyone else has got questions, please use the chat facility available in the GoToWebinar application, and we'll pull those together, and Casey will present those questions for you. But just to kick off, Greg, just roughly, how many different Clicktools forms are used through that process?
Yeah. So right now we have 8 different Clicktools forms. And those forms are really based on the different Marketo emails. So we've managed to use all of our application postings for all the jobs as just a single shared. And then we have essentially a number of different sequencing questions that are applied after. What's interesting is your tool is evolving. I think that we're actually going to be starting to go back in there to reduce them because we can use dynamic variables.
Okay. And just to use a marketing phrase, so what you're effectively doing is you're using data collected via different ClickTools forms almost as progressive profiling of candidates.
That is exactly what this is. And it's really, a lot of this process is borrowed from the learnings that we've had in working with sales and marketing organizations over the last 8 years, and just applying the same thinking to our candidate recruitment process.
Yeah. Good. And what sort of benefits, both tangible and intangible, have you got from the solution, Greg?
So this is a really interesting point, because when I look at the team that kind of comprises Traction, we have some very unusual hires in our business. And two specific examples that came in through this method is I have one gentleman who is one of our top sales reps who previously was a helicopter mechanic, and another gentleman who is in our strategic kind of data and analytics group, who previously was an HVAC engineer for a school district. And why I bring those two up is those two candidates actually came from Craigslist. And we were utilizing this tool, we were able to broadcast in very, very broad, generic, and free environments where we would attract a ton of candidates. And we could post aggressively on things like dollars, or be a little bit more aggressive in positioning the job, knowing that we have a technical means of screening through people and without missing out on good candidates. What was interesting is basically the cream really rose to the top, especially on those two candidates, in that their engagement was so thorough, even though their resumes had questionable practicality throughout the demo cycle, and the engagement, their candidate scores were pulsing above everyone else, which is what drew our interest to them. The other interesting piece of this is we're able to measure ROI on where we're actually placing money. So we actually can see, if we should post on particular job boards, work with different schools and co-op programs. It's been tremendously helpful in figuring out what's actually delivering results, and also speed or pace of candidates. And the other interesting piece of this too is, because this is all in Salesforce.com, it's actually really driving early engagement from my team internally on potential candidates. So while of course there's some information that is secure and kept from the team from seeing, anybody can go in and see the different candidates that are applying for a job, and they can see the cultural or certain questions that we've asked them and their responses, and they chatter on them. So the team is actually kind of after hours, we're seeing actually chatter internally occurring around people, and it's opening up even our internal team's eyes in terms of other candidates that they may know that would have like experiences. So what's really interesting is, I would say we are now at the point of really surfing a bit of a wave of innovation around this, and our team is starting to really collectively think about and really get heavily involved in the overall program of recruitment.
Thanks, Greg. Greg, it's a very rich and comprehensive solution that you've built there. It must have cost a fair amount of money and quite a lot of time to build something like that.
So I mentioned earlier that we had to get, our priority is to drive our clients' projects forward, and we can't afford to really let up the gas at all, especially in a, we are a bootstrap business and we're growing very quickly. So I don't have the luxury of investors, or I could also say investors may not be luxurious. But the overall time to value on this project, it was 2 days to architect the system in a sandbox of Salesforce. This is just creating the objects and setting up the overall workflow. Content development for the different Marketo programs was 1 week. The ClickTools forms were done. The initial forms were all completed in 4 hours. And so the overall time to launch, from start to finish, from, hey, this is an interesting idea, let's give it a try, to all the URLs for job candidate referrals were public on our website, and driving through this process was 10 days. Oh. And the nice thing is we did not buy a single piece of technology that we weren't already using for something else.
So that's a pretty effective return on investment.
Yeah, I would say it was a lifesaver in terms of the scale of this business.
My last question before we open it up, Casey, if you're ready with any. Any plans to extend this application and your use of ClickTools?
Yeah, so what's happened now is we have a really high touch experience for candidates as we get them in the door, but then once people start, it's basically here's a fire hose, plug it in. And so we recently did kind of a survey of our team utilizing ClickTools, of course, on how was your experience in joining Traction, how overall engagement, and just trying to understand the strength and the resilience of our overall kind of current headcount. And what the learning was basically one of the greatest weaknesses we have now is onboarding and training. And so what our plan is to do is to actually extend the ClickTools forms and borrow thinking and knowledge around scripting and sales call scripting to create essentially an onboarding application that allows people based on their role to go through a series of tasks and quizzes and also fun exercises that will be driven through ClickTools forms. For them to basically make sure that they've kind of covered all the bases within their probationary period.
Good. I understand from Casey we've got a couple of questions. So Casey, if you could start with your questions.
Absolutely, and I encourage any more questions from the audience, just go ahead and type that in the chat and I will read it out loud to the team. But one question I have here is, what if I don't have all of these tools? Can I go ahead and build something similar?
So I would say the most important, and this is why this is a ClickTools webinar, I would say the ClickTools application is probably a very important one for getting the data into your instance of Salesforce.com. So I would say that would be a priority tool, as well, of course, having the Salesforce.com license. Now, let's say you don't have Marketo or you don't have a lot of these apps, you can add them in later at any point. And what I would suggest you do is, if you use workflow and email, you could drive some initial engagement, still drive people back into ClickTools forms, and then grow the application as you go forward. But I would say the quickest, most valuable initial win for us was just getting candidates into one system and having a clean way of managing our jobs and our recs. And I'd also actually encourage you to take a look, and I've seen, there's been a lot of different recruiting and job applications samples out there. I believe it's an example that's utilized in the Salesforce developer cookbook. Ours is a little bit different in terms of how we're managing the postings, and I'll be happy to share the data model if you'd like to copy it.
Thanks, Greg. Another question I have here is, we don't currently use Salesforce for HR. What's the best way to convince our CRM admins that this is a need in our organization?
So the CRM admins are going to at first be a little bit leery of having non-core customer relationship information in the Salesforce instance. Now, and when we looked at it, this is why we chose to go the custom object route, because what that does is it gives you, and here's a couple arming words, it gives you, if they don't want to manage the system, they can assign delegated admin to you, which means you have the ability to manage your own objects and your own fields, and it takes the administrative burden off of them. So that it would be one really important piece. The other thing that I would urge your admins to take a look at is, when you look at Salesforce, that cost is already fixed. It's happening. Now, because the recruitment team only needs to see, or the HR team only needs to see all these custom objects. They need to see the contact, which is a standard object, but then it's the application posting, the candidate job. Custom objects do not require a full license to Salesforce.com. You can actually utilize what's called a Force.com license. And that license comes at a fraction of the cost of a full license to Salesforce. So even, and just I'm arming you with a few things you might throw back to, which is, oh, it's so expensive. Well, you're talking about a license that costs approximately, I think it's 40% of a standard license cost for the Force.com users. It drives greater overall data quality, and also helps them justify the overall Salesforce.com costs across the business. Because the danger of all this is you'll go get your own tools, and they'll have more to administrate later.
Thanks, Greg. David, can you tell us, are there other customers using Clicktools for internal process forms? Do you have any examples?
Yes, we have a number of customers using Clicktools for what we call beyond surveys. So, for example, at Dreamforce a couple of years ago, Carlson Hotels presented a case study, and I think that's still probably available on the Salesforce site, which simplified the whole process of approving hotels being added to corporate deals. We also have a customer in Australia that's using Clicktools in a fairly complex way to massively simplify an assessment process that they use. Now, this was not HR assessment, but it was assessment of, I think, if I remember rightly, property. And what took them something like 2 to 3 days to do could now be done in a matter of hours. So it didn't require a site visit. A lot of the information could be collected on site by the person, by the tenant or the landlord, and save massive amount of times. I think the thing that surprises me all the time is how innovative some of our customers are at using an application that we've built. I've got one final question for Greg, and I'm very much aware of time, and we'll close it down after that. We're going to post the recording of the webinar, and we have, of course, got your contact details, and people can contact Clicktools. If they're interested, is there more that you can tell them, Greg? Is that, how should they get in touch with you and learn more about this particular application?
Absolutely. Well, I'm actually just putting up a quick slide. I would love to invite anyone, if you have any direct questions for me, please feel free to email me, and I'd be very happy to kind of get into greater detail on the overall application and how we approach this overall form. And the other thing I'm doing, and I will actually I'll paste it if it's okay with you guys in the chat sequence, but I've actually just quickly, as we've been sitting here, generated a survey, or a Clicktools survey, or a job called Clicktools webinar. So if anyone would like to experience firsthand kind of the overall process that we go through, I'll actually post out this survey into the chat here. And let's see. Actually, Casey, I'll ask you if you could kindly share that out a little bit better. But you can actually go through the cycle yourselves and see how our system works. But yeah, please feel free to send me an email or drop me a line at your convenience.
What we'll do, Greg, is we'll send that link to everyone that's registered for the webinar, and they can try it for themselves.
Yeah, that sounds
Who knows?
great.
You might even find some new hires from it.
I would be grateful. That sounds great.
Very grateful for you for taking the time to share that, Greg. As I say, I think it's a cracking example, not just of the use of Clicktools, but how Salesforce and the ecosystem can be used very, very effectively and very cost effectively. So thank you very much for that. Feel free to contact either Clicktools or Greg at Traction if you want any more information. Thank you very much for your time in attending today. If you want to follow it up, as I say, we'll post the recording shortly. Again, thank you all for your time.